It's time for Mapping Tech in Public Safety with Chris and Steve. Mapping Tech in Public Safety is supported by the National Alliance for Public Safety GIS, Intera Incorporated, Fire Mapping Incorporated, ESRI, and Geocom. This podcast is about GIS and how it integrates into all aspects of public safety, from first responders, emergency management, incident management, search and rescue, next generation 911, and any other topics around public safety GIS. This is episode number 2, recorded on August 24th, 2018. Hey, Chris, how are you this week?
Good yourself, Steve?
Good, thanks. So on our last episode, we did a lot of, talking amongst ourselves and, introducing ourselves, introducing our backgrounds. My background with FDNY, yours with Kirkland Fire, how we fell into GIS and got going with this technology. This week, I really like to start introducing the basics of a map and how a map works and what we do to put this together. This way, our audience, who is the non-technical GIS person, when they're looking at a map, whether it be on paper or whether online, just start understanding what these functions are and how we build this stuff together. So, you would discuss with me that we'd put together a little project and demonstrate how we do this.
Yeah, absolutely. And, one thing I want to emphasize is that when we talk technology and, like a lot of the people we work with or worked with in the past, they intentionally become kind of skittish or scared about technology. When you start talking about, GIS, computers, and everything else, they tend to turn off. And in reality, especially with GIS or geography, if you will, we as responders are probably some of the best geographers on the planet. We know how to get to a call fast, or we should. The demographics of the community, where our problem spots are. Firefighters know commonly where the bad water sources are, where the good water sources are, where their hazards are. And so we, at a personal level, understand geography very, very well, more than most people realize. I think our challenge in public safety is that we can't communicate geography very well to other people. We can't communicate it to decision makers who hold the purse strings to resources we need. We don't really communicate very well to responders or other public safety professionals that aren't responsible for the neighborhood that we're responding in. So I kind of thought we'd just kind of go through and what is GIS and what are the technical components of it. And if you look at a map, if you just look at a basic road map, you'll see some common shapes. You'll see some polygons or area features. You'll see lines such as streets and streams, and you'll see points like landmarks or governmental facilities like courthouses and city halls. And so those are all represented by basically 3 distinct shapes or 3 types of shapes. There are a lot more, and if you're a GIS or you're gonna say, well, there's a lot more than that, but we're just gonna keep it very simple for this podcast. So there's basically 3 shapes, types of shapes: points, lines, and polygons. So what are some examples you think of, Steve, as far as what a point feature could be?
Well, in the fire service, the first thing that always comes to my mind is going to be fire hydrants as a point layer.
Yeah, and how about perhaps even fire stations or police stations, or if you zoom out a certain level, like hospitals? How about a line feature? What are some examples of line features that you could think
of? Again, the first thing I'm going to think about is the road center line, then railroads. I don't often use it much, but I have seen rivers and streams represented by lines.
Yeah, also like power lines, utility lines, like water lines. Kind of commonly, it might include the shape into it. Like if you have a line type feature like a power line or a water line. It usually is represented by a line. And then the third one, like polygon, and what I mean by polygon is something that has an area to it. And so, an example I could think of are buildings and parcels. Can you think of anything else, Steve?
Yeah, fire districts, police precincts, EMS districts. With next generation 911, you have to have polygon layers for your PSAP areas to direct the calls from GIS to the proper 911 center.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, the next thing that's really pretty important or pretty cool about GIS or geography, and this is something we already understand, don't even realize it, is that for each of those features, those common consistent features, for example, fire hydrants, there's attributes or values associated with it. So, and I'm going to go off the top of my head. So, for example, a fire hydrant, that single X and Y point or that point feature will have things like water flow, manufacturer of the hydrant, red of the hydrant, color of the hydrant,
Water main size.
water main size, the flow, the pressure. What else?
Last inspected.
Must inspect it. Absolutely. So you can have, and if when you do like your daily firehouse inspection features, you can actually catalog and figure out like these geographic features have value to it. So for a line, for example, we'll take a road center line. I can think off the top of my head that there's a value to that road. There's the name of the road, what type of road it is. Is it a freeway? Is it a 2-lane highway? Is it a city street? Is it a residential street? What's the speed limit on it? Or what
Direction, one way.
Direction?
Way.
Absolutely, yeah. What else? Addresses, and address range. We won't go into detail on that, but that's very important to our in public safety, especially with 911 dispatching. We need to understand what that address range is. And then for polygon, I'll pick on building footprint. And Steve, can you think of some values associated with a building footprint?
Well, just like hydrants, we could have last inspected in there.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any hazardous material? Obviously, the building address.
Yeah. Yeah, I can also think of, and I think one thing that I think is kind of pretty cool is that the GIS, you can actually calculate area of a building. It's calculated automatically. And so one of the things in the fire service is that you calculate fire flow based on the area, plus a few other attributes like the height of the building. And that's kind of a common fire service formula that you use. The area already calculated for a building footprint. So we're going to talk about. So we kind of covered the shapes a little bit. So how about the map and stuff, and what's usually included? We'll just talk paper maps and kind of common terminology. I'm thinking parts of the map that are important are the actual map itself, like the graphic or the map layer, if you will, and then the compass rose or the cardinal direction of the map, or some other things that you could think of.
Yeah, a legend, a scale bar.
Yeah, scale bar like
Scale
that.
bar is very important. Hopefully in a future episode, we're going to talk about the U.S. National Grid.
Yes.
So, using a scale bar and certain scales of your map are very important. So definitely a scale bar. The title of your map, map representing, who created the map, when was the date, when was the map created.
Yeah.
So, kind of if it's an updated map or not.
So there's parts of the map or elements of the map that are important to understand and support. So when you understand the shapes of the maps and the fact that also that these features on a map are layered, and we'll use that term layered a lot. Basically, just like a cake or a layer cake, you have different layers of cake one on top of the other. And so typically, when you create a map, and this was like this back in the old school days when cartographers worked for National Geographic, they would start with a polygon-shaped layer on the bottom and then add lines on top of the polygon features. And then on top of that, they usually add points so that they all show up on the map. And so part of this podcast that we're going to do is we're going to do a visual demonstration and explain it. If you're listening on audio, we're going to be as clear as possible, but fortunately, we're also going to show and have a YouTube video on our website at mappingtechandpublicsafety.com. And you'll see in our latest post, you'll see the YouTube video attached showing the creation of a map. We're going to do the Bob Ross art style version of creating a map. So anyway, Steve, getting back to the map. So here's, okay, so Steve and I talked about how to create a map using different layer files and different features and how it looks to create a map in GIS. And so we won't get into specific details about what file types we use or what coordinate spaces we have or anything like that. We're just going to talk about points, lines, and polygons and how they stack up on each other. So you see in this window, there's some weird looking shapes. There's like a big blob of lines that go around, and there's in the middle are a couple points. This is kind of a starter map that I use to create a map. This is a program that I use called ArcGIS Desktop. There are several other kinds of GIS programs. There's some free open source ones that you use. Some elements of Google Earth, the old style, could function kind of like this. But basically, you're taking layers and adding them to a particular project or document, and you're arranging it in such a way, and you're designing it in such a way that looks kind of pleasing. So we're going to kind of do a Bob Ross demonstration, if you will, of how to create a map. To do a really good quality map, you need to spend a little bit of time evaluating colors and icons and things that make it look pretty. But for demonstration's sake, we're just going to go through briefly and add some layers to the map, symbolize it in a certain way, and then arrange it so that it makes sense. So you'll see here on the left-hand side, we have two layers right here, a fire station layer and a city limits layer. Now, we've talked about before in GIS, everything has both the location and attributes associated with this. So I'm going to click on this fire station layer and show the attributes or table that's associated with it. And this is just like an Excel spreadsheet. And on the top, you have like a header column or field names. And in this case, for a fire station, there's some attributes like the station name, the address, which city and state it's in, maybe the short name of the fire station. And in this case, in this table, it has some bunch of numbers that we just won't worry about now. Some other examples include like what's the web address of that fire station, some comments about that fire station, what type of fire station it is. It it paid, volunteer, or combination. It could
apparatus type.
Apparatus type. The name of the fire department. All kinds of attributes can be associated with that layer. In the city limits layer, you'll open up the attributes and you'll see some similar features. But it really doesn't mean too much, but usually you'll find like name, maybe an ID number that could be attached to another database. But in this case, there's a couple of values. There's acres, like how many acres that this polygon is, which says 11,678 acres. The area, which is probably in square foot. So there's a lot of values that you can capture in a polygon layer. For this example, you see the points on top of the polygon, but if I were to drag it down or underneath, you see that all of a sudden it disappears. Now, it makes sense because like if you're layering things on top of another, if you have a sheet of paper and then you have a bunch of points on top of a sheet of paper, and you were to put that sheet of paper on top of the points, you'd see that the points should disappear. Now, the nice thing is you could drag it back, or you could turn the layer on and off. And all mapping applications have some function where you can turn the layer on and off, or you can move it around, or move the drawing order of the layers. So for this map's kind of starter map, and I'm going to start with some publicly available data that I can download off of the city website. I'm going to use the city of Kirkland, for example, since I'm pretty familiar with it. But you can do this with any city government data. You can get data from all kinds of sources. You can get data from local cities, counties, states, tribal governments. You can get it publicly for free. It's actually, since it's governmental data, usually that data is free. I think a red flag would be that if the data is not readily available, in my mind, from a opinion point of view, there's something wrong with the GIS data from tax generated local government not having that data freely available. I think it's a law. So I'm going to add a few other features. So what are some features that you think we should add to this map?
Well, again, the first thing I think we should add is the center line, street center line.
Okay, so I'm going to just drag and drop a line to this map. And so you'll see all of a sudden some lines start showing up in the shape of streets, but they're really pretty horrible looking. What's some other things I can think of? We could add lakes. And so it's right next to a lake. And oh boy, that does not look like a lake. It's brown. And when you add layers to a map, it's adding it in just a very generic color form and just picks a color. And so you're gonna have to do that yourself. I see a parks layer here. That's closer. That's actually a greenish color. And let me add one more. I'm gonna add the hospital. So there's gonna be a point layer for hospitals. I'm going to rename this layer to actually mean hospitals. So you'll see here, I have 6 layers, two points, 1 line, and 3 polygon layers. And at any time, I could drag these underneath something and reorder it, and it will kind of disappear and mess up my map. So I want to be kind of careful that I want to make sure that the important layers are at the level that I want to see them at. And so generally, the rule is that you want your polygon layers on the bottom, followed by the lines, and then points on top. But sometimes you might have an example, for example, parks and lakes, which should go one on top of the other. So, for example, are there lakes in parks? So, like, what I'll do is put the lakes layer on top of the parks layer, because it's common to have lakes inside parks. Because if you see, I put the lakes layer underneath, zoom in, see an example, you'll see that you'll have this weird shape right here where the park boundary is actually sticking out in the middle of the lake. So I'm going to usually want the lake on top of parks. So what do you think of this map? You think we can go to work with this map there, Steve?
Yeah, definitely. And I think one important thing though is, polygon layers can be hard sometimes.
Yeah.
You don't always necessarily want to try to cram everything into one map.
Right.
What I mean by that is sometimes you can mix and match polygons. In this case, the city, the parks, and the lakes, you could easily do that. But if you're looking at, say, a fire district boundary and a police district boundary, and they're the same boundary, well, you can't have one on top of the other on the same map because you're not going to be able to see them.
Right.
Or maybe you make the outline of the police precinct very wide and a different color with no inner color, and lay that on top of the fire districts if you want. But then again, if you want to add your EMS district or your PSAP area, you really can't squeeze all that onto one map.
Exactly.
So you have to really, pick and choose what's the meaning of your map.
Yeah.
Right now we're creating a fire station map. So we want to kind of stick to those different features and not go too off tangent with other things. If you want to get into a police district map, and showing your precincts and where your patrol car areas are, stuff to that nature, then you really need to start a second map.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the biggest fails, when we've tested responders doing maps, is they'll tend to want to just jam everything onto one map, and then they'll say, oh, I'll just figure out what I want to look at. And when the rubber meets the road, you're going to want to look at something that's for a particular task. You're not going to want to do something that, you have the map that has everything on it. You're just going to have to check things on and off for you to view. So it's it's important to like understand what the purpose is of the map, create the map for that particular purpose, not get too busy with it. So
I also think it's important to remember that if you're dealing with a certain type of map as a first responder, you have to remember that you're only going to have a limited amount of time to look at this map in response mode.
Right.
depending on what area of the country you live in, depending on the size of your district, but you may have a 4 to 7 minute response time. So somebody responding on an apparatus may not have a lot of time. So again, you got to take your map, choose it carefully, decide what information is immediately important for
Mm-hmm.
that first responder.
Yeah.
But then that doesn't mean you can't have another map for hydrant inspections, back at your station, is a little more detailed and can be reviewed, sitting in an office. So again, you have to take these maps and decide what your purpose is and design it towards that purpose.
Exactly. Unfortunately, the nice thing about GIS and GIS software is that you can take the same information, for example, your hydrant map, your hydrant layer, you can edit it or maintain that hydrant information, bring that layer into another map, make it look a little bit differently, but you're doing the task once of moving or creating or adding a hydrant to your data. You're not re-adding a hydrant to a new map. You're always maintaining just that layer by itself. So for this example, I have this map kind of set up, and it's really, frankly, it's ugly. Designing a good map is you want to do some elements of cartography or map making to make it kind of pretty. So what I'm going to do is change in this left-hand column, you'll see the list of layers. I'm going to start with just city limits. City limits are important, but not that important. So I need to make that so it's kind of subdued or doesn't stick out. And I'm going to just try this yellow color. Maybe make the line a different color, say purple. See what that looks like. I know I'm not going with purple just by looking at it. So I make that a different color. Next thing I'm going to do is take this parks layer. You want to make it, obviously parks are green. So I'm going to stick with green. This is kind of an olivish green. Maybe I'll try a darker green, see how it looks. And part of making a map is just testing how the look of the map goes. So the next thing I'll do is this lakes layer. Obviously, lakes are blue, and oddly enough, there's even a blue lake color in here. I'll click that, and this is just basically a palette of symbols and colors that I can adjust the map with. Now here's kind of something that's different. So I'm going to adjust this road value, and let's kind of visualize a roads layer on a state highway map. Do they all look the same? No, they don't look the same. They look different based on what type of road it is. So the question you're going to have to kind of dive into is what is the attributes for the database associated with that road? And fortunately, I know Table they have different classes of road. And so I'm going to just kind of base the road design on the functional class of the road. In this case, you'll see values for like neighborhood access. It's a collector type road. It's an on-ramp or a ramp to a highway. And it's also an interstate. So I'm going to use that value, and I'm going to create a scheme of design that's based on the functional class of the data associated with this road. In this mapping program, I'll go in and you actually adjust the symbology based on the value of the table in the database. And I'm not going to go into detail how you do it, but I'm going to adjust based on functional class, and it's going to give me an option to select all. And you'll see here in this list of values that I'll have collector type road and interstate, mine are arterial and highway ramps. So you just have to play with it a little bit. I'm going to hit it OK and see what it looks like. So you can see here, there's always a few roads that are probably arterials. You can see here, I can tell you that this is a freeway that goes through this jurisdiction. And then you'll see some of these brown color roads that are likely neighborhood residential streets. I'm going to adjust it a little bit, but I'm not going to spend too much time on it. So for the interstate, I'm going to make it, they have a default highway value. And then for ramp, they actually got a default scheme for a smaller red value associated with highway on-ramps. For arterials, I'm going to make it's green. I think I'm going to make it kind of a darker black, maybe kind of make it fatter just a little bit, increase the line size. And you see here, the map's kind of starting to come to shape a little bit. You'll see that the values kind of look more like a typical street map. I'm going to do one other adjustment. I'm going to make this neighborhoods access light gray. So you'll see here that you're getting closer and closer to a map that looks like more like a printed wall map. Now, I'm not going to mess with the rest of it. I'm going to leave it as is. That's more time. I would probably spend a little bit more time adjusting some of the colors of this map. You kind of get the idea. And one thing that's missing is, how do we know which road this is? You know, commonly, how do we know which road it is? It's labeled. Well, the nice thing about it is that in GIS, a good road layer will have actually the road name attached into its database. You'll see here, you'll see a list of road names. I can actually physically label the street layer based on the values associated with the table and its database. So I'm going to do it automatically as the squirrels in my computer spin. There's I'm going to hit the option to label based on the full street name. You know, I'm just going to keep it to its default name. You'll see here that you'll see road names appear on the map associated with the value of the street. It's kind of dirty and it's kind of unclean, but you get the idea. And part of the thing that cartographers and GIS folks do a lot of is setting the values or attributes related to the label of streets. Sometimes they'll do it manually. Other times they'll use programs to calculate the best label placement of a label. But you can see here, for our demonstration purposes, that there is labels associated with that street. I'm going to do one final thing. I'm going to symbolize this point. And so this is the fire station's point. And I'm going to actually label it that kind of means something kind of, I can understand the meaning of it. I want to look at that icon and actually look at it and understand right away what that icon means. So you know what, I can do a search in this program called Fire Stations. It's going to give me a list of, options on how I could symbolize a fire station. So you know what, this is kind of the standard go-to for fire stations, kind of a 3D building with an F on it. And it's going to go from just a very generic point to a icon associated with fire stations. I'm going to do the same thing while I'm at it with hospital. So it's easy. And you can see that I'm closer in just a short period of time, a map with common ID or common icons for fire stations, roads, lake bodies, and you'll see those labels kind of show up, but I can turn those on and off or crank those so that they don't show up and get in the way. So that's kind of a nutshell, kind of a demonstration of how you put layers together, stack them in their appropriate order, symbolize it, and create a down and dirty map. The work comes in the fine tuning and making things so that it's a little prettier, but you get the idea. This is how you start generation of a map. The final part of this demonstration I kind of want to show is, how do you take this information and make it sort of printable? So when Steve and I were talking about, you know, what are the components of a map, like the compass, the title, the legend, there's two options there for most mapping programs. There's sort of a map view that you use to kind of maintain and create the map, and then there's this basically a paper view you use to create the map. And so again, I'm going to go very simple and down and dirty. I'm going to add a few features in this map. So I'm going to readjust. I'm going to bring up another toolbar real quick. Readjust like the frame of this map. And you know, one of the challenges of creating a map is you got to fit the map layout to the page. And so you notice this jurisdiction is pretty tall. It's longer north and south than it is east and west. And that always can present a challenge. I always feel like the cities in the Midwest have an easier time in creating a map. The other thing I could do is add features to it. And I'm just going to, for simplicity's sake, I'm just going to insert a north arrow. And I have plenty of options on what I can do. I'm just going to pick one. And the neat thing about this software is that if you rotate the map frame, the compass rose will adjust to the orientation of the map frame. I could add a title. Well, I'm going to do a legend. and it gives me an option of what do I want to add. I'm not going to add everything. I'm just going to add, let's add fire station hospitals. I'll just add a few features. I'm hit finish. I'm just going to let it add it to the map. You see it right there. Probably need to do a better job not having an overlay on top of the map. And then I think the final thing I had is anything else you would like to add to the map here, Steve?
Well, definitely add the title.
All right, I'll do a title.
And I would just show also the scale bar.
And you can adjust like the size of the map, the size of the text, the design of the text. Big, I'll go kind of crazy. I'll make it. I'll make it blue. I'm going to make it bold too, just to make it kind of different. So then we'll map the podcast, and I'll add a scale bar. So I'm going to add insert scale bar. And what it does is it gives me plenty of options on what to add to it. I'm going to keep it simple. So you can see how some guys will spend a lot of time and energy kind of designing and tweaking a map fit a certain design. And this is just a brief overview of how you create and add layers to a map, add features associated with it. What do you think? Is this worth production?
Definitely worth production.
I don't think so.
But some of the stuff I'd like to talk about with you, Chris, is
sure.
You and I are GIS professionals. We know how to do this. We know the software. We've taken classes, learn how to use this program. Not everybody is going to do this.
Right.
So let's take a step back and look at it from a first responder's perspective.
Sure.
How do I use this? Who do I go to? Can I only see it on paper?
And there's a ton of different ways to do that. First, the good question you have, Steve, is like, who do I go to talk about this? And so if you're like a city public safety responder or a county responder, whatever government you work with, there's a guy somewhere that you're associated with that does this kind of work. I think perhaps the only challenging organization is if you work for like a fire district or a governmental entity that's a special district. You might have to do a little extra work in finding the person to do that. For example, if you're a fire district, you might have to go to the county that your jurisdiction is in to seek support. You might have to go to the city that your district is responsible for. Sheriff's departments will probably, since they cover a county, I guarantee you that there's a county GIS person, a county mapping person, and they call it different things in different counties. But there is somebody in the governmental agency that you're associated with that does this kind of work, and it would be very, very open to helping you out. Most GIS folks love helping public safety responders out. And they're glad to do it. But the thing that you kind of have to arm yourself with is you have to arm yourself with some information on what do we need from that resource, how do we ask for it, and so you're going to need some education involved with that. But we're definitely going to talk about that in the future. But there's also other resources like we'll include in our website, techandpublicsafety.com, some links on some really good resources on how to get educated in terms of GIS technology.
One of the things we had talked about with this podcast, and one of the things that we're going to be explaining in the blog is, again, this is not for public safety personnel to be doing. But we want you to understand how the map works, how you can go into the program and say, I want to see hospitals that are only trauma centers. Or I want to see all the fire stations in a certain district.
Right.
And these are kinds of questions that a public safety professional can ask a GIS person. There are some applications now, especially in the days of web maps and apps, that you can start doing some of this by yourself, which we're going to demonstrate in future episodes. The overall case, we want to explain the basics of the types of questions you could ask.
Absolutely. And there'll be more to come on that. So, well, as we were talking, I also kind of fiddled with the map and actually completed the map, and it's closer. It's still not ready for big time yet, or for prime time, but it's a map where it's a good rough draft. So anyway, Steve, we talked a little bit about offline about one of the benefits of GIS, and I gave a presentation just before about how do you take a professional desktop mapping application and using it to create a paper map. And while it's quick and dirty, this is also not the 1990s when we both started doing GIS. It's the 2000s and 2010s. So the latest thing is actually to share this map information online, and you actually use what's called a web map to add the layers. And the same principles apply. You still have points, lines, and polygons. You still layer the layers based on what layout level you want to show the layer. But on top of that, the nice thing about web mapping is that you have what's called base maps related to it. And so we're using a product called ArcGIS Online, which is the online version of the desktop application that I gave the demonstration on. And one of the options I want to kind of scroll through real quick is the base map gallery. And the neat thing is, before I actually basically created a base map to use on a paper map, well, in this case, there's actually a gallery of maps that I could use associated with the geography I'm looking at. So you'll see here, I could change the map scheme or design to like a more streets focused layout. I could show also aerial imagery as the base map. And then finally I could add, even change it to like more of a navigation view. So each theme or map design kind of reflects a case use of how you want to use that base map. Some of them could be that the labels of the street names or the labels are a little bit larger so you can see it on a mobile device. It could be that it's a little bit crisper. And so it's just personal choice and design of a map. Now we're going to give an example here today of, since it's wildfire season and the location I'm at is super smoky, I'm going to kind of show you a couple of scenarios where you'd use publicly available data just to add to a map information that you don't have to maintain or access. All you do is just search for it and add it. So in this case, by adding to the map and adding a layer from the map from the web, I could do a search for wildland fires. And I get this layer that shows wildland fire activity. In this case, it's the Puget Sound region. And as the taping of this podcast, there's a few fires going on. Again, it's very smoky outside where I'm currently recording right now. And there's a fire just down Puget Sound a little bit, but also, if I zoom out a little bit, I see a lot of other fires going on, especially in eastern Washington. And since this is a USA-centered layer, I'm not getting layers outside the United States. However, I'm definitely receiving smoke from wildland fires in Canada. So you see here in this layer, you'll see some information associated with it, and also you'll see the fire perimeter of the fire. And this is publicly accessible information. Whoa, what happened here? You'll see actually something else turned on. Actually, if you look in this map, you'll see that there's actually a layer called Fire Rescue Station. And it actually turns on based on which scale you're zoomed on the map. So the closer you get to a more local level, you'll actually see these layers appear. And the reason why this is important is if you zoom out to a national level, you don't want your map clouded by a bunch of clusters of points that you can't understand. So these are actually fire stations that are online that you can access and add to the map. So,
and I'd like to point out, Chris, that when you clicking one of these icons and bringing up the pop-up, all that information is the data that's stored back in the table of that point that we demonstrated with the desktop version.
Absolutely. And one of the neat things about GIS is that you do the work once, and you can replicate it over and over again in different products and different applications. Or if you don't like the symbol for your fire station, that symbol is not tied to that point, it's tied to the layer itself. So you'd actually change the design of the symbol globally. So anyway, you see here that there's a huge benefit, and we're just going to touch on this briefly, that there's a huge benefit to the future of GIS, the fact that you can access this pretty much anywhere on any device through the web, and it's readily accessible and available to anyone that needs it.
I think another important thing about online web mapping that I feel is that not only can you put your map together for your department, anybody can see it online. They can pan around, zoom, look at the data, which is very important for the personnel within your department. But now you're taking it to the next level where if, say, Seattle starts posting data, you could start bringing all this together.
Yep.
And if Seattle does a mutual aid, say, to Kirkland, they could actually now start seeing this data, whether it be hydrant data, whether it be pre-planned data. And even though they may not be familiar with your area, they can start seeing this data online as they're responding.
Absolutely. So that's the neat thing about the future. It used to be that these would be basically, these maps would be just rolls of paper in some office somewhere, and you have to ask somebody to make you a new map or request it. But now with the ability to share this stuff seamlessly over the internet, you have instant access to information like we've never had before.
And it also makes it a lot easier, again, for the purpose of our podcast, is getting GIS into the hands of the non-technical public safety professional.
Right.
And these applications are so easy to use. Plus, people are very used to using maps now with, because of Google Maps and Bing Maps.
Right.
Not necessarily having all this data, but it has that same look and feel.
Yep.
And you don't have to be a GIS professional to be able to pan around this map, click on some points, lines, and polygons, start bringing up data, seeing what's behind that data, seeing what the pre-plans are, seeing what the water main size of a hydrant, because you have a super tanker that needs, say, a 20-inch main or greater. These are simple tools that anybody could use, and that's what we're trying to promote here.
Absolutely. Very cool. Well, I think we kind of hit on the highlights of what we want to talk about today and stuff. I don't think I have anything else to add. And how about you, Steve? Do you think of anything else?
I'd like to just demo one more thing, Chris.
Sure.
I sent you another link.
All right.
Okay, so as I mentioned, GIS can be used to ask questions and visualize something and get answers back. So one of the things that a friend of mine had asked me to do with the Nassau County Fire Departments here in New York was they put together a tactical rescue unit. 8 different fire departments are participating in this program. And he had sent me the data in a spreadsheet on their response areas. So one of the first things, I brought all this together and I pieced it together with the areas on the map of all the local fire departments. And one of the things we quickly saw was that certain departments had a very, very large area of response. The map that's you're looking at right now is the current response matrix. When this was initially developed, there weren't as many teams involved. Now some teams have been added. They wanted to reorganize the response matrix. So Chris, if you could shut off that current first due area. Now with this layer is their proposed response areas. So again, we have 8 different teams throughout the county, and now they're starting to look at different patterns of what they feel would be a better response. When first thing I noticed with this proposed section was you could see on the east side, the right side of the map, was one fire department is covering everything from the South Shore to the North Shore, and very far in going west towards New York City. So when I looked at this, I had said to him, I don't really think this is a good matrix, because now you could visualize it and see greenish area, how big of a response one unit's going to have. So they actually had a few meetings, and now they're discussing changes that they want to make, and then they're going to send me the data and I can reorganize it for them. And again, they can see this online. They don't know GIS. They don't know how to put this together, but this is something they could easily go online. They could look at, see the visualization of response areas for these rescue units, and then modify it from there. Then they could send me back the data. I could reorganize it on the map and reshare it, or just make a new layer so they could overlay it, turn it on and off from their current to the proposed, and kind of see what makes sense. I'm also working on nearest facility, meaning, this is where the firehouse is. What are the closest battalions and fire departments should they, drive time to lessen their response time, and start sharing the different areas amongst the different rescue units. So again, this is just a lot of stuff that can be done with GIS. You have to go to a GIS professional to put something together like this, but now they have it in a simple web format. They could also see this in an app. I shared the link to one of the apps that these teams could use, so they could actually just see it on their iPhones within the app. Gives them that visualization. They don't know how to put GIS together, but they know how to use GIS. So this is just another phase of web technology that I just wanted to demonstrate how public safety professionals can easily use these tools.
Awesome. It was very good. Very good. Well, cool. I think that kind of covers it for today. So again, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to reach out to us. Our website is mappingtechandpublicsafety.com. And this is Chris.
And I'm Steve.
And that's Steve. We'll talk to you later.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah.
A podcast about GIS for and by public safety professionals.